What is a medical fact that sounds fake but is 100% true? The operating room was calm again. The hard part was over. The surgeon stepped back, gloves slick, eyes scanning the open abdomen like he was looking at a map that didn't match the terrain. Everything inside looked wrong. Not broken, just messy. The intestines weren't sitting in a neat, perfect pattern like a diagram in a textbook. They looked like loops of soft tubing that had lost their place. A student whispered, "Do we put them back in order?" The surgeon didn't even glance up. "There isn't time for that," he said, "and it doesn't work the way you think." He lifted the warm, living loops gently and placed them back into the cavity. Not random, not careless, just practical. A careful fold, a slight turn, a final check to make sure nothing was pinched. Then he closed the incision. Later, someone asked the question everyone was secretly thinking: how can that possibly be okay? Because the human body isn't a suitcase you pack neatly. The intestines aren't meant to be arranged like cables. They're meant to move. They're constantly shifting with breathing, posture, digestion, tiny waves of motion that never fully stop. After surgery, those movements don't magically disappear. Over time, the loops settle into spaces where they fit best, sliding into place like water finding level ground. What looked like chaos for a moment wasn't chaos at all. It was a living system returning to its own pattern. That's the part that stays with you. The body is smart in ways you can't see. It doesn't need perfection from human hands. It needs survival. It needs blood flow. It needs room. And once those things are protected, it does what it has always done, quietly correcting itself, adapting, healing, rearranging. People imagine surgeons performing impossible precision every second. Sometimes the real miracle isn't what the surgeon does. It's what the body does afterward, alone in the dark, when nobody is watching. Next story. It started like a normal shift. Someone collapsed, someone screamed, and suddenly the room turned into a storm of movement. The patient on the floor wasn't breathing. No pulse, no time. Hands moved automatically. Compressions, count, breathe, repeat. The world shrank to rhythm and pressure. Then something impossible happened. The patient's eyes opened, not a twitch, not a reflex. Open, focused, aware, terrified. Their hand lifted and grabbed the rescuer's wrist like they were trying to say, "Stop! What are you doing?" The fingers were weak but purposeful. Their mouth moved, silent words forming without sound. For a split second, everyone froze. It felt like the dead had spoken. But the heart still wasn't truly back. The monitor didn't celebrate. The pulse wasn't stable. The body was only waking up because compressions were pushing enough blood toward the brain to spark consciousness, just enough oxygen to turn fear back on. The rescuer swallowed hard and kept going. That's the cruel part of CPR. You may be saving a life and traumatizing yourself at the same time. The body can wake up in flashes while still being in cardiac arrest, like a light bulb flickering before it burns out or stabilizes. The patient might look awake, might move, might fight, might cry, but stopping compressions to comfort them can be the mistake that ends everything. So the team did the hardest thing. They treated the body like a mission, not a person, until the heart could take over again. Later, when it was all over, nobody laughed about it. Nobody used it as a fun story. The rescuer sat alone for a while, staring at their hands, remembering the moment those eyes opened, remembering how human it felt, because nothing prepares you for being grabbed by someone who is not back yet, begging you with their eyes while you keep pressing their chest to pull them out of the dark. Next story. The game was loud. Cheering, sneakers squeaking, a ball slamming into gloves like tiny explosions. It was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be normal. Then the pitch came in too fast. The batter flinched instead of swinging, and the ball struck his chest with a sharp, hollow thunk. Not a dramatic hit, not a crushing blow, just bad luck at the worst possible time. He took one step back. Then he dropped. At first, everyone thought he was joking. People laughed for half a second, waiting for him to pop back up. But the silence came fast when he didn't move. His eyes were open, staring, like his body had been turned off mid-sentence. A parent ran in. A coach knelt down and shouted his name. Nothing, no breath, no response. Someone yelled for an AED. That's when panic finally arrived. Real panic, the kind that makes adults forget words. The coach started compressions, fast and hard, trying to push life back into a body that had suddenly decided it couldn't run its own electricity anymore. Because that's what it was, electricity. There's a rare event where a blunt hit to the chest disrupts the heart's rhythm if it lands in a tiny timing window during the heartbeat. The heart muscle isn't damaged, the ribs aren't shattered, the person is healthy, but the rhythm snaps into chaos and the heart stops pumping effectively. It feels unfair because it is unfair. The AED arrived, pads went on. The machine beeped, analyzed, and ordered the shock. One press of a button, one jolt, and the body jumped like it had been yanked back from the edge. Later, people would call it a miracle, but it wasn't magic. It was timing, training, and a device that refused to let the story end there. And that's the lesson that sticks. Sometimes danger isn't about force. Sometimes it's about a perfect storm of milliseconds, one ordinary moment landing in the exact wrong slice of time. Next story. He hadn't recognized anyone in weeks. He stared past faces like they were fog. He forgot names, forgot places, forgot the order of simple things. Some days he didn't even remember that he was in a hospital. His family sat beside him anyway, holding his hand, telling stories into the silence because love doesn't know what else to do. Then one night, everything changed. His eyes sharpened like someone wiped steam off a mirror. He looked directly at his daughter and said her name, perfectly, not a guess, not a stumble, her real name, the way he used to say it. She froze. "Dad?" He nodded, calm and steady. "I'm here," he said softly. "I don't know how long." The room felt unreal. Nurses quietly stepped back. Family members leaned in like they were afraid a loud breath would break the moment. He spoke clearly. He asked about people. He apologized for things no one expected him to remember. He smiled at the sound of familiar voices, like he was tasting a life he thought he'd already lost. He even made a joke, his old humor, the kind that used to fill the house. And then, as suddenly as it came, the clarity began to fade. His words slowed. His focus drifted. The light in his eyes dimmed like a candle running out of air. His daughter tried to hold the moment together with questions, with tears, with pleading, but you can't bargain with a body that's shutting down. This is something caregivers whisper about, a sudden rally near the end, a brief return of clarity and energy that feels like a miracle, until you realize it's often a goodbye. No one knows exactly why it happens. Maybe chemistry, maybe timing, maybe the brain firing its last clean signal. But what matters isn't the science in that moment. What matters is that the family got one more conversation with the person they thought was already gone. And when he slipped away again, they weren't left with only loss. They were left with closure. Next story. The caregiver had learned to live with the heartbreak in small doses. Some days the patient called her Mom. Some days he demanded to go home to a house that didn't exist anymore. Some nights he cried for his wife, angry, confused, grief-struck, like he was stuck in a loop he couldn't escape. Then one night the air changed. He stopped shaking, stopped murmuring. He looked up like he'd just woken from a long, terrible dream and finally recognized the room. His face softened, his eyes focused. "Can you sit with me?" he asked. The caregiver stepped closer, stunned. Of course. He took her hand gently, not with panic, but with intention. "I'm here right now," he said, voice quiet and steady. "Usually I'm not." It didn't feel like the usual confusion. It felt like someone had returned. He asked for water. He thanked her for helping him. He spoke about his wife with real memory, not the fractured kind. He even described a childhood story. Names, places, details, like the past had been unlocked and handed back to him for a final hour. The caregiver didn't interrupt with emotions. She didn't say, "Do you remember me?" She didn't ask him to prove anything. She just listened, terrified that one wrong word could shatter the moment. He laughed once, a real laugh, the kind that belongs to the person dementia steals. Then he leaned back, exhausted, and squeezed her hand. "Tell them I loved them," he whispered, "all of them." When his family arrived, they got what they hadn't had in months, a final conversation with the man they remembered. He looked at each of them like he was taking a photograph with his eyes, storing it somewhere deep. By morning, the clarity was gone. By the next day, he was slipping away completely. People talk about miracles as if they always save someone. Sometimes a miracle doesn't change the ending. Sometimes it changes what the ending feels like. Next story. When they said the word amputation, everything inside him went cold. He pictured an empty space where his leg used to be. He pictured crutches, stairs, staring, the permanent feeling of less. He tried to be brave, but grief doesn't wait for permission. Then the surgeon said, "There's another option." It sounded like science fiction. Remove the damaged knee area, rotate the lower leg 180 degrees, and attach it back so the ankle becomes a new knee joint for a prosthetic. The foot would face backward. The idea felt impossible to accept, but the surgeon explained it simply. Above-the-knee amputations are harder to run with, harder to balance with, harder to control. Rotation can preserve muscle power and function in a way a higher cut can't. The day of surgery, he didn't look. Weeks later, when the bandages came off, he almost couldn't breathe. His foot pointed behind him like a broken rule of nature. It looked shocking, like his body had been rearranged wrong. But the physical therapists didn't flinch. They treated it like engineering, training the brain to understand a new joint, teaching the ankle to behave like a knee, strengthening muscles that now had a new job. Learning to walk again was brutal. Learning to trust it was worse. Some days he hated it. Some days he refused to look at his own reflection. Then, slowly, the impossible began to feel normal. He learned to step, to turn, to climb, to run. The strangest part was realizing how much control he had. The new knee responded sharply, powerfully, like something rebuilt rather than removed. The prosthetic didn't feel like a replacement. It felt like a tool connected to something still alive and strong. People stared sometimes. He stopped caring. Because the truth was simple. The body doesn't need to look familiar to be powerful. Sometimes survival isn't about keeping things the same. Sometimes survival is accepting a new design and walking forward anyway. Next story. It began after a cold. Nothing dramatic. A fever, a sore throat, the usual misery, then recovery. He went back to work, back to normal life, thinking the story was over. Then his feet started tingling. At first it felt like pins and needles, the kind you get when you sit wrong. He shook his legs, walked it off, laughed at it. But the numbness didn't leave. It climbed upward like something invisible was crawling under his skin. Within a day, his calves felt heavy. Within 2, his knees didn't want to cooperate. By the time he reached the hospital, he needed help standing. The scariest part wasn't the weakness. It was the speed. Doctors asked questions quickly. Reflex checks, strength tests. Can you push against my hand? Can you lift your toes? His body tried to obey and failed in small humiliations. Then the fear hit its peak. His breathing started to feel wrong. Guillain-Barré syndrome doesn't attack muscles directly. It attacks the nerves, the wiring that tells muscles what to do. The immune system, triggered by an infection, mistakes the nerves for an enemy and begins stripping away their insulation. Signals get weaker. Movement becomes delayed. Then movement disappears. He watched his hands stop working the way they always had. He watched his legs turn into dead weight. He lay in a hospital bed while machines measured what his body could no longer do reliably on its own. People think paralysis is a slow, tragic fade. Sometimes it's a sprint. Treatment began fast. IV medication, monitoring, care that felt like holding a collapsing building upright. Nurses watched his breathing like hawks. Family members tried to smile while their eyes betrayed terror. And then, after the rise came the long wait. Recovery wasn't quick. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow rebuilding. A finger twitch, a toe movement, a first shaky stand. Every tiny improvement felt like a victory earned in blood. The lesson burned into everyone watching. Your immune system is a powerful protector, but if it gets confused, it can turn you into a prisoner in your own body overnight. Next story. The dizziness didn't come from spinning rides or heights. It came from turning over in bed. 1 second she was fine. The next, the room snapped sideways like someone grabbed the world and shook it. Her stomach rose into her throat. She clutched the sheets, eyes wide, waiting for the motion to stop. It did stop. after a few seconds, but it came back every time she moved her head the wrong way, rolling to the right, looking up, bending down to pick something up. Each movement triggered the same violent, floating spin, as if gravity had decided to betray her. The strangest part? She wasn't sick. No fever, no headache, no warning. Just sudden vertigo that made everyday life feel like a trap. Doctors asked strange questions. Which side makes it worse? Does it happen when you lie back? Does it last under a minute? Then someone finally said the words that sounded ridiculous. It might be crystals. Inside the inner ear, tiny mineral crystals help the brain understand balance and motion. But sometimes those crystals shift into the wrong place. When they do, your brain gets false signals, like a broken sensor telling you you're spinning when you're not. That's why it feels so terrifying. Your body is screaming, falling, while you're lying perfectly still. The fix was even stranger than the cause. A specialist guided her through a sequence of head movements, slow turns, pauses, tilts, like solving a puzzle with gravity. The goal was simple: guide the crystals back where they belonged. Halfway through, the spinning hit so hard her eyes watered, she nearly panicked. The doctor stayed calm. "That's a good sign," he said. "It means we're moving the right thing." When it ended, she sat up carefully, and for the first time in days, the room stayed still. Sometimes the body doesn't need medicine. Sometimes it just needs one small piece placed back in the right corner, so the world stops spinning again. Next story. She used to think the pain was random, a sharp cramp in the middle of a normal day, a pinch so sudden it made her stop walking. Sometimes it was a deep ache on one side, low and precise, like a small warning siren inside her body. It wasn't her period. It wasn't food. It wasn't stress. It was something stranger, her cycle announcing itself. It happened almost like a schedule, around the same time each month. The pain wasn't constant. It was quick, sharp, and then it faded into a dull soreness that lingered like a bruise. Sometimes it came with a tiny wave of nausea. Sometimes it came with nothing except the sting. One day she finally asked a doctor. The doctor nodded like it was obvious. "That sounds like ovulation pain," she said. "It even has a name." Mittelschmerz. The word sounded harmless, almost cute, until she understood what it meant. The moment an egg is released from the ovary can cause pain. A tiny internal event, something nobody sees, can still be loud enough for the body to feel. A follicle ruptures, fluid irritates tissue. The brain registers it as a jab or cramp. Most people never notice it. Some people feel it like a signature. The weirdest part was realizing her body wasn't malfunctioning. It was working exactly as designed, just louder than most. She started tracking it. The pain became a marker, a timestamp. It helped her understand her own patterns instead of fearing them. It also taught her something uncomfortable. Bodies are not silent machines. They are living systems with quirks, alarms, and strange personal behaviors. For years, she'd been taught that normal meant painless. But normal doesn't look the same in every body. Sometimes normal means your body taps you on the shoulder once a month and says, very clearly, something just happened, and whether you wanted to feel it or not, you did. Next story. He expected a quick blood draw, a small pinch, a bandage, done. He sat down, rolled up his sleeve, looked away like he always did. The nurse tied the tourniquet, found a vein, cleaned the skin, and slid the needle in with practiced ease. Then it happened. A sound, a faint crunch, dry, gritty, like stepping on thin ice. The nurse's eyes flicked up for half a second. He heard it too. The nurse didn't react dramatically, but the pause was enough to make his stomach twist. Was that normal? He asked, forcing a laugh. The nurse kept her voice calm. Sometimes, she said carefully, some vessels can be stiff. He didn't understand until later, when a doctor explained what calcification can do to the body. Over time, minerals can deposit in blood vessels, making them less flexible, more like a hardened tube than a soft, living channel. It's not something you feel day to day. It's not something that announces itself with pain. It can announce itself with sound. That tiny crunch made him realize how much can change inside you without permission. The body doesn't always break with fireworks. Sometimes it hardens quietly. Sometimes it stiffens. Sometimes it becomes fragile in ways no one can see from the outside. He started noticing other things, how older relatives bruised easily, how IV lines were harder to place, how a simple needle could become complicated when the plumbing wasn't soft anymore. It wasn't meant to scare him. It was meant to warn him. Health isn't only about feeling good today. It's about what your body has been slowly becoming for years while you were busy living your life. And that day, a routine blood draw turned into a moment of raw truth. Even your veins can change shape. Even your veins can grow older. And sometimes, the first sign is a sound you'll never forget. Next story. He'd heard the claim before and dismissed it as an urban legend. People born blind don't get schizophrenia. It sounded too perfect, too clean, like a made-up fact designed to impress strangers. But then he started reading about it seriously. And the real truth was more interesting and more complicated. Researchers have noticed something strange in medical history. Schizophrenia seems extremely rare in people who are blind from birth. Not impossible, not proven to be never, but rare enough that scientists have argued about it for decades. Why would blindness affect a mental illness? One theory is that the brain builds reality using a mix of senses, especially vision. Vision doesn't just show you the world, it helps anchor your thoughts to what's real. If that anchor is missing from birth, the brain may develop different safeguards for interpreting sound, touch, memory, and imagination. Another theory is that the brain rewires itself early, using areas normally devoted to vision for other skills. That neuroplastic change might alter how hallucinations or delusions form, if they form at all. And that's where the mystery becomes emotional, because it suggests schizophrenia isn't just a chemical imbalance or a simple switch. It may be tied to how the brain learns to predict the world, how it builds meaning, how it decides what signals to trust. The brain isn't just a recorder, it's a storyteller. It fills gaps, it guesses, it builds an internal model of reality every second. If that internal model is built differently from the start, the entire architecture of perception changes. No one has a final answer. Some studies challenge the idea, some support parts of it, but the mystery remains powerful because it forces a bigger question. What does it take for the brain to lose trust in reality? And what protects it? Sometimes the most fake-sounding medical facts aren't meant to be catchy. Sometimes they're clues pointing toward a truth we still don't fully understand. Next story. He joked about it at first. "Well," he said, smiling weakly, "at least I'm getting an upgrade." The family laughed because laughter was easier than fear. But in the operating room, the truth was quiet and strange. When someone receives a kidney transplant, doctors often don't remove the old kidneys. They leave them where they are, tired, damaged, failing, and they place the new kidney lower in the abdomen, connecting it carefully like adding a new engine into a system that's struggling. It sounds wrong until you realize the body is not a simple machine. Removing native kidneys can be risky. It can mean more bleeding, more complications, more trauma to a patient who is already fragile. So if the old kidneys aren't infected or dangerous, surgeons often let them stay. They become silent passengers, present but no longer in charge. That's how some people end up with 3 kidneys, 2 that failed, 1 that saved them. After surgery, he expected to feel instantly different. Instead, he felt exhausted, sore, and afraid to move. Healing took time. But then something shifted in his life. Energy returned. Appetite returned. A kind of clarity he hadn't felt in years started creeping back in. His body no longer felt poisoned by its own waste. One day, he pressed his hand against his lower belly and imagined the new kidney working, quietly filtering blood, balancing fluid, doing its job without asking for applause. He thought about how strange it was that medicine didn't always remove what was broken. Sometimes it simply added what was needed. People assume healing means getting rid of the problem, Sometimes healing means carrying the old damage with you forever, while also carrying a new chance to live. And if you ever forget how far science has come, remember this. There are people walking around with 3 kidneys, and only one of them is doing all the work. Next story. The rescuers pulled her from the ice and thought it was over. Her skin was pale, her lips were blue, her body was stiff like something lifeless. She wasn't breathing, her heart wasn't beating, the kind of scene that usually ends with someone zipping a bag closed. But one doctor refused to accept it. "She's not dead," he said, voice hard with stubborn hope. "Not yet." She had been trapped in freezing water long enough for her core temperature to drop to an almost impossible number. 13.7 degrees 6, a temperature that sounds like a mistake, a temperature where the body should not function at all. Yet cold does something strange. It slows everything: metabolism, brain activity, oxygen demand. It can preserve tissue the way ice preserves food. It can turn minutes into hours, buying time that the body would never have in normal conditions. That's why emergency medicine has a grim saying: "You're not dead until you're warm and dead." The hospital became a battlefield. Machines took over, doctors worked in shifts. Warmth was introduced carefully, slowly, too fast and the body could crash. The room wasn't heroic music and speeches. It was focus, it was numbers, it was controlled urgency. And then, against logic, she came back. Her heart returned, her lungs returned, consciousness returned. Not instantly, not magically, but piece by piece, like a system rebooting after catastrophic failure. Recovery took time, pain, weakness, rehab, the long shadow of what almost happened. But she lived, she walked, she spoke. She became proof that the human body can sometimes survive what looks like a final ending. People fear cold because it kills quietly, but cold can also protect. That's the terrifying miracle. The same force that can erase you can also pause you, long enough for someone to pull you back. And somewhere in a hospital, a doctor's stubborn voice still echoes in that moment, defying death with one sentence: "Not yet."